Most people believe their problem is stress. It isn't. The real problem is friction inside the mind. A quiet moment appears, and instead of resting, you start negotiating with yourself. You replay something you said. You rehearse something you might say. You measure yourself against someone who is not even present. The body sits still, but internally there is movement, constant movement. Doubt pushing against ambition. Fear interrupting intention. Memory arguing with possibility. It feels normal because it has been happening for years. But normal does not mean healthy. It only means familiar. Notice what happens when you try to rest. You close your eyes. Instead of silence, you hear commentary. It questions. It predicts. It criticizes. It reminds you of unfinished tasks and past mistakes. You attempt to control it. You tell yourself to calm down. You try to force stillness. The effort tightens your chest. The thoughts grow louder. The more you push, the more resistance appears. Eventually, you assume this is simply how the mind works. You accept noise as part of being human. But what if the noise is not the natural state? What if it is a habit reinforced over time? And what if your exhaustion is not caused by external pressure, but by the internal conflict you never resolve? Each decision becomes a debate. Each opportunity becomes a risk analysis. Each mistake becomes a story about your identity. The mind does not just observe events, it narrates them. Then it reacts to its own narration. You end up fighting a story rather than responding to reality. You were taught that thinking more equals control. If something feels uncertain, think harder. If you feel anxious, analyze the reason. If you hesitate, calculate more scenarios. On the surface, this seems responsible. In practice, it fragments attention. Overthinking creates the illusion of preparation, but often it delays action. You wait for perfect clarity before moving. That clarity never arrives. So you stay where you are. There is a difference between awareness and mental noise. Awareness is simple. It sees what is in front of it. Mental noise adds commentary. It predicts failure. It defends ego. It searches for reassurance. When awareness acts, movement is direct. When noise interferes, hesitation appears. That hesitation may last a fraction of a second, but it is enough to distort performance. Centuries ago, hesitation was not a mild inconvenience. It was fatal. A warrior standing in front of an opponent did not have the luxury of internal debate. A half-second of doubt meant vulnerability. A moment of fear meant exposure. The samurai understood something most people overlook today. The enemy is not only outside you. It is the voice that disrupts alignment between perception and action. This is where Mushin emerged, not as decoration, not as mysticism, as survival discipline. Mushin means no mind, but it does not mean emptiness. It means no interference, a state where awareness functions without being obstructed by internal commentary. Thoughts may arise, but they do not dictate movement. Emotion may appear, but it does not dominate response. Imagine standing in a clearing before dawn. The air is cold, breath is visible, a wooden sword rests in your hands. Across from you stands another student equally trained. In that moment, skill is not enough. Technique alone cannot protect you from hesitation. If your mind splits into analysis and fear, your body follows that split. Your strike arrives late. Your defense collapses. The samurai trained to remove this split. They practiced repetition until the ego grew restless. They sat in stillness until impatience surfaced. They learned to observe the rising voice instead of obeying it. The training was not about becoming fearless. It was about functioning clearly despite fear. Mushin was the state where awareness moved without waiting for approval from thought. Most people attempt to silence the mind by force. They suppress thoughts. They distract themselves. They replace one stream of noise with another. But suppression creates tension. Distraction creates dependency. The samurai method worked differently. Instead of attacking the mind, they exposed it. They allowed the noise to surface under controlled conditions. Repetition stripped away illusion. Silence revealed attachment. Consider what happens when you repeat a simple movement for an extended period. Lift the sword, lower the sword, lift again, lower again. The body grows tired, but something else happens first. The mind begins to complain, this is pointless, this is slow, I should be doing something more advanced. Beneath the complaint is ego. It wants stimulation, it wants recognition, it wants progress measured in visible change. When that complaint appears, most people react to it. They adjust, they quit, they seek novelty. The samurai did the opposite. They stayed. They observed the voice without negotiating. Over time, something shifts. The voice loses intensity, not because it was defeated, but because it was not fed. This is the first fracture in identity. You realize you can watch your thoughts. If you can observe a thought, it is not identical to you. There is awareness and there is content within awareness. The content changes, awareness remains. That realization is destabilizing. If you are not the voice that criticizes you, then who are you? If you are not the fear that rises before action, what is fear? The samurai did not answer these questions with philosophy. They answered through discipline. They trained until the separation between awareness and thought became experiential, not conceptual. In modern life, your battlefield is different, but the mechanism is identical. You face conversations that require composure, decisions that require clarity, moments that demand presence. When your mind fractures into commentary, you lose precision. When awareness stands unobstructed, response becomes clean. Mushin is not about becoming passive. It is about removing unnecessary friction. It is not about eliminating thought. It is about ending obedience to thought. The samurai method begins with something simple. Notice the noise. Do not fight it. Do not cling to it. Observe it long enough to see that it rises and falls on its own. This is the beginning of the war you did not know you were fighting, not against the world, against identification with the voice inside your head. Once you see that voice clearly, the structure of your inner conflict starts to change. And when that structure changes, your experience of every moment begins to shift with it. You begin to see that the noise is not random. It follows patterns. It grows louder when something important is at stake. It tightens when your identity feels threatened. It accelerates when uncertainty appears. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. When you remove distraction, the mind has no surface to grip. It panics. It increases output. It produces urgency. It tells you to check something, fix something, improve something. The moment you sit still, it demands movement. This stage is where most people turn back. They assume the practice is failing because the noise increases. In reality, the noise was always there. You simply gave it space to be heard. The samurai understood this escalation. When a warrior first trained in stillness, restlessness intensified. Doubt sharpened. Impatience surfaced. The ego does not dissolve quietly. It resists. The training did not respond to that resistance with comfort. It responded with consistency. The sword was lifted again, lowered again. Breath was drawn in slowly, released slowly. No argument with the voice, no attempt to suppress it. Just repetition. Repetition reveals dependency. When the mind cannot escape through stimulation, it begins to expose its habits. 3 habits appear quickly. The first is the need for control. The mind wants certainty before action. It wants reassurance before commitment. It wants guarantees before risk. In combat, this desire is fatal. In life, it becomes hesitation. The samurai trained to act without demanding certainty. Not recklessly, but cleanly. Awareness assessed. The body responded. No additional narrative required. The second habit is attachment to identity. The mind protects a self-image. I am skilled. I am respected. I must not fail. When that image is threatened, anxiety spikes. Under pressure, performance collapses because the ego is defending reputation instead of engaging the moment. Mushin strips away that defense. When there is no clinging to identity, there is less fear of damage. The third habit is addiction to stimulation. Noise feels productive, movement feels alive, stillness feels empty. Modern life amplifies this addiction. Notifications, commentary, constant input. The mind rarely rests. It confuses motion with progress. In training, stillness becomes the mirror. Without distraction, the addiction is exposed. As these habits surface, discomfort increases. You may feel irritation toward the simplicity of the practice. You may question its value. You may feel the urge to abandon it for something more dynamic. This is the ego attempting to regain control. If you interpret this phase as failure, you will stop. If you recognize it as exposure, you will continue. There comes a moment, subtle and unannounced, when the intensity begins to thin. The voice still appears, but it lacks urgency. A thought arises, and instead of triggering reaction, it drifts. You notice it without leaning into it. There is space between stimulus and response. That space feels unfamiliar at first, almost fragile. In that space, breath becomes steady, movement becomes direct. When lifting the sword, you are lifting the sword, not proving anything, not measuring progress, just moving. This is not dramatic. It is quiet. The absence of friction is the signal. Eventually, the training leaves the clearing and enters real challenge. In combat practice, an opponent strikes unexpectedly. Normally, thought would surge, block, defend. Do not fail. Instead, awareness registers movement and the body responds before commentary forms. There is no internal debate. Only alignment. This alignment does not eliminate fear. It reduces interference. Emotion may arise, but it does not hijack response. After the exchange ends, there is no surge of pride or collapse into relief. There is steadiness. The moment happened. It passed. Awareness remains. It is important not to chase this state. The mind will attempt to recreate it. It will say, "That was it. Do that again." That desire introduces tension. Motion cannot be forced. It emerges when clinging loosens. The samurai teachers warned against attachment to peak moments. They treated them as weather, present, then gone. The discipline was not to hold the state, but to return to practice. Breath, observation, repetition. Over time, this discipline restructures response patterns. Instead of reacting from narrative, you respond from presence. Instead of defending identity, you engage the task. Instead of drowning in prediction, you operate within perception. The battlefield changes. It may be a negotiation, a presentation, a difficult conversation. The mechanism remains the same. A stimulus appears. The mind attempts commentary. You recognize the commentary, you do not feed it. Awareness remains available. This is the breaking point of ego control, not dramatic collapse. Gradual weakening. The voice loses authority. It becomes information rather than command. You begin to choose response instead of obeying impulse. There will still be days when noise returns with force. Fatigue, stress, unexpected conflict. Mushin is not permanent silence. It is trained non-attachment. When the storm rises, you return to breath. You return to observation. You return without judgment. The art lies in returning, not once, repeatedly. Each return reinforces separation between awareness and content. Each repetition builds stability. Eventually, the need to silence thought disappears. The goal shifts. You no longer seek emptiness. You seek clarity. Clarity is simple. What is happening now? What action is required? What can be released? When these questions replace internal debate, life becomes lighter, not easier, lighter. The samurai method does not remove difficulty. It removes unnecessary resistance to difficulty. When resistance drops, energy is conserved. That energy becomes focus, focus becomes precision, precision becomes calm strength. This is the second stage of the discipline. You see the ego's grip, you feel it tighten. You refuse to wrestle with it. Instead, you stand still long enough for it to loosen on its own. In that loosening, something stable emerges. It is not dramatic enlightenment. It is a steady presence, a quiet center that does not need constant reinforcement. From there, action flows without friction. And once you have felt that even briefly, you understand why warriors guarded this training so carefully. It changes not what you do, but how you do it. Years pass, the training changes shape. The sword is still lifted, but the lesson is no longer about the blade. It is about continuity. Can awareness remain steady when circumstances shift? Can you stay grounded when praise appears? When criticism lands? When uncertainty stretches longer than expected? The samurai who embodied Mushin did not look distant or detached. They looked ordinary. What distinguished them was the absence of internal struggle. When a situation demanded action, they acted. When it demanded waiting, they waited. No argument with reality, no resentment toward delay, no obsession with outcome. Presence became their default. In modern life, your battlefield is not a training circle. It is the meeting where tension rings unexpectedly. It is the message that disrupts your plan. It is the silence after you speak when doubt tries to fill the space. The internal voice still appears. It suggests correction. It questions your ability. It predicts embarrassment. But if you have trained in observation, the voice is heard without being obeyed. Consider a difficult conversation. The other person raises their tone. Instinct urges you to defend. Thought accelerates. Prepare a rebuttal. Protect your position. If you react from that surge, clarity narrows. But if you remain present for one breath, awareness widens. You hear not only the words, but the tension behind them. Your response becomes measured instead of reactive. This is Mushin applied beyond the dojo. It is not passivity, it is unclouded perception. When perception is clear, action requires less effort. Energy is not wasted on internal rehearsal. You respond to what is happening, not to the story forming around it. Many people assume calmness means suppressing emotion. That is misunderstanding. Suppression buries feeling until it resurfaces with greater force. Mushin allows emotion to rise without attaching identity to it. Anger may appear, fear may flicker. You observe them as temporary weather. You do not build a house inside them. The foundation of this steadiness rests on simple pillars. Observation without resistance, breath without force, returning without judgment, acting without internal narration. These are not abstract principles. They are daily disciplines. Observation without resistance means noticing thought as movement, not truth. When a critical idea arises, you do not argue with it. You watch it form and dissolve. This weakens its authority. Over time, the habit of automatic belief fades. Breath without force anchors attention. When tension enters the body, breath often shortens. By extending the exhale slightly longer than the inhale, the nervous system recalibrates. Awareness stabilizes. The mind follows the body's rhythm. Returning without judgment may be the most overlooked practice. The mind will wander. It will drift into memory or projection. When you notice this, you return gently, not with frustration, not with self-criticism. Each calm return strengthens discipline more than harsh correction ever could. Acting without internal narration emerges naturally from the first three. When awareness is steady and breath is stable, movement simplifies. You do not need to motivate yourself with dramatic statements. You do not need to convince yourself of worth. You simply respond. To integrate this into daily life, begin with structured practice. For 7 days, set aside 5 minutes. Sit upright. Close your eyes. Notice the movement of thought. Do not alter it. Do not chase it. Simply observe. When attention drifts, return to the sensation of breathing. For the next 7 days, add deliberate breath regulation. Inhale slowly for 4 counts. Exhale for 6. Let the exhale soften the body. Allow the mind to settle without demanding silence. For the final 7 days, introduce mild challenge. Practice awareness while walking, while speaking, while working. Notice when commentary begins. Return to breath without interrupting activity. This conditions presence under motion. You will not eliminate thought in 21 days. That is not the aim. You will experience moments where thought loses dominance. Those moments reveal possibility. They show that identity is not fused to mental noise. As discipline deepens, the space between stimulus and response becomes reliable. You may still feel pressure, but it does not overwhelm. You may still encounter uncertainty, but it does not paralyze. The mind becomes a tool instead of a tyrant. Eventually, you stop measuring progress. You stop asking whether you have achieved Mushin. The question itself carries attachment. Instead, you notice whether friction has decreased, whether reaction time has softened, whether presence feels natural rather than forced. The samurai teachers often described Mushin not as a destination, but as a way of walking, each step attentive, each breath unbroken. When the mind drifts, return. When emotion rises, observe. When action is required, move. There is quiet strength in this approach. It does not seek validation. It does not announce itself. It shows in steady posture, in measured speech, in decisions made without internal turbulence. The world around you will remain complex. Challenges will not disappear. What changes is your relationship to them. Without constant internal argument, energy becomes available. That energy can be directed toward skill, toward relationships, toward purposeful work. In time, you may notice that the voice inside your head still speaks, but it no longer dominates the room. It is one signal among many. Awareness chooses what matters. The rest fades naturally. This is the legacy of no mind. Not emptiness, but freedom from compulsion. Not silence imposed by force, but clarity emerging from discipline. When you understand this, you do not chase stillness. You cultivate steadiness. Stand in the middle of your day and observe. A thought arises. Let it pass. A feeling surfaces. Let it move. An action calls. Respond. This is the practice. Strength does not need noise. Presence does not need explanation. When the mind ceases to fight itself, what remains is simple. Breath in, breath out. Awareness steady, action precise. The war you did not know you were fighting begins to dissolve. Not because the world changed, because you did.